This is presentation 3 of the Eleanor Clarke Slagle Lectures of the 1970s, presented by Jenny Fung, Therese Rios, and Lauren Sabihan.
Hi everyone, welcome to our OT party. We're glad you can make it. We're going to go over the historical context of the 1970s and our major themes before we start to spill the OT with our honorees. So in 1971, Puerto Rico became the first state in America to require licensure for OT practice. And in 1972, the National Institutes of Health awarded AOTA a 10-month contract for the first of a 4-part project. And this project was basically to analyze the scope of occupational therapy practice. In 1973, the CODA Career Mobility Program was established to allow upward mobility in the profession. This program was designed to allow AOTA certified assistants with a minimum of 5 years of verified successful full work experience to take the professional qualifying exam. In the same year, the first PhD program in occupational therapy was approved at NYU. And there was also the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which prohibited discrimination against people with disabilities. In 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act made it so schools could be more accommodating for students with disability. And this was the act that brought occupational therapists as well as technology into schools. So this decade was super important for individuals with disabilities. AOTA also officially made distinctions between the roles of OTs and CODAs, and the AOTA also created a mission and goals statement. And lastly, in 1979, the AOTA and AOTF worked together to fund 16 small projects to research the effectiveness and basis behind the practice of occupational therapy.
Okay, now to go over the major themes. Occupational therapy in the 1970s was mostly concerned with professional identity. Different aspects of professional identity were explored, including professional visibility and status, as well as the shifts and additions in OT practice. Regarding professional visibility and identity, in the 60s, policies like the Social Security Act of 1965 included OT services, but those services could only be ordered in conjunction with physical therapy or speech-language pathology. So OT still had to depend on other professions to be visible to clients outside of the hospital setting. In the 70s, the occupational therapy profession was still working hard toward becoming recognized as a valuable service for clients, and people were still discussing whether OT should be considered a medical, a health, or a social services profession. Reimbursers for insurance coverage expressed that OT needed to be a functional, not a diversional service. Because of this confusion about how to categorize OT, the profession struggled with being as well recognized and distinguished as other health professions. And then regarding professional status, instead of requiring a formal education to practice OT, the profession was originally developed through the apprentice model, in which experienced practitioners passed down their knowledge of their experiences to young apprentices. And there was also a career mobility program, which was controversial because therapists who were educated at the professional level felt upset that OTAs could gain professional status just by taking the licensure exam without earning extra college credits. These issues with education requirements for OT gave people the impression that OT was only semi-professional instead of fully professional. And then in this era, the profession also focused on the qualities that made OT unique from other health professions. For example, the AOTF developed a professional code of ethics, which expressed OT's professional values and beliefs about practice and relationships with clients, colleagues, and society as a whole. To talk about paradigm shifts in OT practice, leaders of the profession debated whether OT should focus on specialized or generalized areas of application, and also whether OT should accept the medical model approach or a more holistic model for treatment. So many practitioners at this time were heavily focused on scientifically based treatments for OT and straying away from arts and crafts modalities. These discussions led to a deeper understanding of the philosophy, which led to new models of practice that characterized the uniqueness of occupational therapy as a discipline. And this is a photo taken from 1973 of 2 children playing with something called the development cube. This was one of the outcomes of discussing theories like developmental theory in OT. The development cube served as a playground item for kids to practice and play with 6 different activities that involved problem solving, manual dexterity, and hand-eye coordination. And now we are going to have a quick intermission before we start the OT party.
glad you ladies could make it to the OT party. Let's start by introducing ourselves and discussing some themes of OT. I'll start. My name is Geraldine Finn, and I graduated from Tufts University with a certificate in OT, and I received my master's degree in human development and family relations from Simmons College. I have extensive work experience in the field of OT as a therapist, research associate, consultant, and director of OT practices at various locations. A few of my accomplishments include developing a day hospital for adult psychiatric clients at Cleveland State Hospital and rehab programs for individuals with physical and developmental disabilities, as well as adolescents with emotional disturbances. In addition to being awarded the Eleanor Clarke Slagle Lectureship, I was also inducted into the roster of fellows of the AOTA in 1973. And 50 years ago, in 1971, I held my lecture entitled The Occupational Therapist and Prevention Programs. The main themes seen in this lecture include practice, professional identity, and professional visibility. So, right off the bat, we see that my title focuses on a healthcare trend in the 70s, which was to prevent disabilities and maintain public health. This correlates to the first theme of my lecture, which was that OT practice should remain relevant by meeting the needs of its time. And I quote myself, that is, this is a demand that needs to be acted on immediately if we are to take our place with others involved in health problems of our day. So, this was my call to action to immediately reorganize current practices and expand OT services into relevant settings, which at this time in the 70s would include expanding into health planning for the community. I also stressed the importance of research and developing a comprehensive understanding of OT in order to plan appropriate programs and be able to collaborate with different practice areas. And as for my third theme of professional visibility, I spoke about the need for the profession to develop leaders to confidently move through these challenges, which were definitely not easy, given that they were living through these social changes while simultaneously gaining knowledge at the same time.
Geraldine, do you believe public health is still relevant to OT today?
Well, to answer your question, therapists, past and present, need to be willing to learn more about how we can help current needs. And in regards to your question, yes, I believe public health and expanding our knowledge and contribution to it is still relevant to OT today. I stated in my lecture that we are a profession possessing knowledge that is particularly necessary to maintain the health of people. And today we are seeing this come to fruition through occupational therapy in the Healthy People 2020 initiative. And I'm very pleased to see that the AOTA still promotes the role of practitioners in health promotion and prevention. Wait, Mary, I thought I saw you near the cucumber sandwiches earlier. Let's talk about you next.
Yes, I was feeling a little bit hungry. But it's funny you say that you graduated from Tufts University because I also graduated from Tufts University with a postgraduate degree in occupational therapy. I also received a bachelor's degree in music from Boston University. In my career, I worked as a therapist and a director of occupational therapy at the Newington's Children's Hospital in Connecticut until retiring in 1978. Then I worked as a consultant for the teaching staff at Mount Sinai Hospital in Hartford. I published several books about motor and neural development in children with cerebral palsy. My work on the effect of primitive reflexes on children with CP might pave the way in the future for OTs to begin using a developmental approach to working with children with CP as well as other developmental disabilities. As for awards, I received the Who's Who of American Women in 1968 and the Award of Merit from the Connecticut Occupational Therapy Association in 1975. I was also named AOTA Fellow in 1973. And now to go over the themes of my lecture, I wanted to first talk about the importance of professionalism in occupational therapy. I emphasize that the profession's success and survival depends on its ability to clearly define itself in regard to what services it provides, who receives the services, and who provides the services. I said this in my lecture and I'll say it again. Once we have gained the depth of knowledge necessary to substantiate with confidence our definition of occupational therapy and the role of the occupational therapist, and once we have decided and identified the means through which we can give our services as a professional service, then and only then will we be able to say that we have reached the highest level of development. This process won't reach its end until people can confidently define the profession and the role of OT. Like I said, occupational therapy has undergone the same process of learning and development as the young child, but it has not reached its fullest potential. Ultimately, the field of OT must move from realization to activation to be acknowledged as a professional source for child rehabilitation. And even now, we see that the profession of occupational therapy is still refining itself and making itself more recognized as a healthcare service.
What do you think about using occupational therapy for children at the time?
Well, going into pediatrics as a therapist who mostly treated World War II veterans with disabilities, using craft treatments in 1950, it didn't make sense to me to do crafts as treatment for children with disabilities. During this era, there was just not enough scientific evidence to justify the use of crafts as a therapeutic modality. Also, I felt like the professionalism of OT was being damaged by those OTs who use crafts as treatment, but they were not able to justify the value behind the use of those crafts. So, for these reasons, I felt compelled to change the working definition and concept of OT and adopt more scientifically based treatments. But now, in 2021, I feel like this sentiment is no longer relevant to the profession today because we see crafts as being used as effective modalities of treatment, and there's tons of studies showing its therapeutic effectiveness. However, I wanted to make my main point that practitioners should research and understand the scientific value of a treatment modality before implementing it with a client. And then in my lecture, I also used an important analogy to show the parallels between the development of a young child and the development of an OT. When it comes to development, the quality and quantity of these stimuli, their reinforcement, and their meaning to an organism will have a profound effect on its future development. Essentially, the environment must provide meaningful and purposeful stimuli in order for an individual to actively participate and learn and grow. Each stage of development is influenced by the quality of the preceding stage. So, any environment that has meaningless stimuli will leave the individual ill prepared for the next stage of development, whether that's the child or the OT student. And this process of becoming a competent and skilled therapist will ultimately solve the problem of establishing professionalism, which is a huge theme of the 70s. And that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fiorentino. And next up, we have Josephine Moore. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Josephine Moore, and my education background includes a BS in geology and occupational therapy, and I also do have a master's and doctorate's degree in anatomy. I was a neuroanatomy and educator and an occupational therapist as well. I'm a member of the Fellow American Occupational Therapy Association, the American Occupational Therapy Foundation, the American Association for Advancements of Science, and the American Association of Anatomists. I was asked to attend and send materials to the World Federation Occupational Therapy Conference in Copenhagen as well in 1957. My Eleanor Clarke Slagle lecture was in 1975 and was titled Behavior Bias in the Limbic System. And at first read, one would probably think my main theme of my lecture was theory because I talk a lot about brain structures, the limbic system, and things that the limbic system controls, and also our behaviors in great detail. I believe it is important to know the theory behind our actions and why our emotional drives make us do things, the things that we do. And but after careful analysis, you can see that the theme of professional status was very present in my lecture. I described the possible reasons as to why occupational therapy, a female-dominated field, has had difficulty to gain recognition compared to other fields created and dominated by men. And this may be due to the differences in men and women when it comes to our brains and limbic system.
Interesting. What would you say the differences are between men and women's brains?
I believe that some men fail to recognize and understand the needs which females recognize, which is the need to help. And this can be due to the idea and theory that men have a less of a limbic drive in those specific areas. I also think this makes it difficult for us to gain notoriety and professional status. Another theme that you can come to the conclusion of after analysis is the conclusion that OTs struggle with professional visibility as well. I mentioned that remark that people have said about our profession, that treatments work merely because we know how to motivate people. And my response to them would be that they need to then read our literature for our treatment techniques. And I believe they also have a lack of insight and ability to function on an emotional level, which makes it hard for them to comprehend the techniques that we use. I believe that society needs to acknowledge how valuable occupational therapy actually is and realize that our techniques and treatments are evidence based. And then this will then help with our professional visibility.
Hmm. Miss Moore, I was wondering, since the field of medicine is a male-driven system, where will the field of occupational therapy stand in the future? Will we be able to establish even more of a professional status in medicine, or do you think we'll shift to another area of focus?
I think that's a good question. I think that professional visibility is still something we are struggling with because, for the most part, the general population and also male dominated fields do not know what occupational therapists do or acknowledge our value in the field. They also don't see the value of occupational therapy until they are the ones who need help to gain their independence back in their occupation. So, this is kind of when they're operating more at a limbic level and need help. But I do believe we are on our way, and I'm excited to see what the future of OT, where we are within the field of medicine.
That's great. Thank you, Miss Moore, for speaking up about professional visibility and theory. Miss King, I'm sure you have a lot to say regarding theory too. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. My name is Lorna Jean King, and I graduated from Milwaukee Downer College with a bachelor's in OT. And I later pursued graduate studies at USC and at the University of Arizona. My career involved instructing OT courses at USC, as well as being a staff therapist at Brentwood Veterans Administration Hospital and Arizona State Hospital. I have also had the pleasure of lecturing all around the world in the US, Canada, New Zealand, and South Africa. I am also known, in fact, for founding the Center of Neurodevelopmental Studies in Phoenix. And in addition to being awarded the Eleanor Clarke Slagle Lectureship, I was also inducted into the roster of fellows of the AOTA in 1973. In 1978, I held my lecture entitled Toward a Science of Adaptive Responses. And the themes seen in this lecture were professional identity, professional visibility, and theory. So, in regards to these first two themes of professional identity and visibility, I stressed the need for a comprehensive theory to unify our OT practice and to delineate the profession's relevance in healthcare. This profession, occupational therapy, was born from common sense, with people knowing that it is good to keep themselves busy with purposeful behavior occupations, therefore making it difficult to see the importance of OT. I understood that it would be difficult to do this since occupations are so universal and could be organized in so many different ways. But this difficulty also reflects through the challenges that practitioners face when they're communicating with clients and their colleagues. So, in regards to this concept, I quoted Dr. Riley, who said, "What is that factor which makes occupational therapy so uniquely valuable that if the profession were to disappear tomorrow, it would have to be quickly reinvented?" So, in my opinion, through a comprehensive theory, the profession can explicitly define this irreplaceable factor in the profession, thereby establishing its professional identity and validity. As for my final theme, I was there discussing my own theory of adaptive responses, and I proposed this as one of our possible unifying theories. I propose this because the concept of using sensory input is required for adaptation, and this is seen throughout the lifespan. And given the growing body of knowledge regarding sensory systems in the 60s and in the 70s, I said, occupational therapists are better prepared than any other healthcare professional to make use of this information. So, by combining client information and sensory knowledge, therapists can structure environments and use purposeful activities to elicit this adaptive response, as well as helping to target less intuitive goals, such as recovering from illness, maintaining health, and preventing disability, which I regarded as adapting.
Do you believe your concept of creating a comprehensive theory is applicable today?
So before I answer your question, I would like to quote myself from my 1978 lecture. And I said, who has not had the experience of trying to explain OT to someone only to realize that people think they know all about it because, of course, they have experienced occupation and activity. They are thinking about it in everyday terms, and the therapist is hopefully thinking about it scientifically and analytically. So, although words are exchanged frequently, no communication takes place. So, to answer your question, yes, I see that this is a concept that is still relevant today in 2021, since so many conversations very similar to this are taking place. The profession is still attempting to find concrete ways to both define and unify the profession, as well as establish its necessity in healthcare. Today, as the profession continues to expand and branch off into numerous specializations, there will also continue to be a pressing need for revisions to our framework, or the OTPF, that we use in this profession to unify our practices. And lastly, I would like to show our references.
And to section 3, you are all cordially invited to the OT party on Friday, March 5th for our learning activity. Feel free to bring a non-alcoholic beverage of your choice. Thank you for joining us.